Okay, well, welcome everybody to the Rory and James podcast. This is episode 2, and I'm of course joined. Well, I should say, my name is James, and I'm joined by none other than Rory. Hello, Rory.
Hello, we're here again.
Here for round 2.
Absolutely, go on.
The people wanted more.
Well, I hope so. Go on.
So, for those who don't know, the format of our podcast is that we pick 2 random subjects to discuss. And we also welcome your comments and feedback, and do email us. The email will be on the screen, and do email us or drop us a comment on YouTube, and we're happy for suggestions. But we've got our 2 topics for today. The first one is abstract alongside photorealism in art. And Rory is the in-house expert on all things to do with painting and art. I thought I might hand this over to you to start with, about because you came up with this topic.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to sort of introduce everyone to sort of why you came about with this topic, and sort of what your interest is on those 2 sort of interesting concepts.
Well, I just thought there was enough discussion range in there, and really, I was talking about photorealism. By that I mean accuracy of drawing, that it looks like a photograph. And the person I was talking to at the time said that an artist wouldn't take that as a compliment. But of course, it depends on what you're choosing to achieve. If you wanted to make a picture look like a photograph, that would be an achievement. If you wanted to make a picture look abstract, that wouldn't be an achievement. It would, you try making something look abstract from the start. So there's 2 sides to it, and that was really why I started thinking about it.
Fair enough. And do you have a strong view about, like, what's your preference? I know art is all just about people's own sort of take on things, but do you prefer sort of more photorealistic art, or do you like the more abstract stuff?
I guess I prefer more photorealistic art in general terms. It's a very, very close call on that, but there's something you can see more without as much explanation. Although, as a contrast to that, if you were looking at the more abstract thing, there's more to see in the range of it. I remember once painting a picture that I thought it was a collage of random shapes that I thought was actually a sleeping duck on a lake, and somebody else saw it as the Sydney Opera House, believe it or not.
Wow,
so it depends, really. Also, photorealism refers to actual photography and the accuracy of the way you can make something look. But I didn't know that until I started doing the research for this.
Yeah. One of the fascinating things I remember you doing, I think maybe last year, was taking actual photographs from a camera and then using software to make them so abstract that they no longer became photorealistic, even though they were photos, and became sort of their own abstract art. I don't know if you want to sort of tell the listeners about that.
Well, that was just a way of sort of painting in a different way, without getting one's hands dirty with paint, really. It was just a way of using computer software that I happened to have. I'm not very technical, so stuff I happened to have to turn it into something else, really. And it depended again on how the viewer saw it. I didn't have a particular intention with it. It was just something that was interesting and just unfolded as I began to do it. What artistic experiences with visual art do you have?
Well, it's funny actually, because I really struggle with art. I mean, I love music. I love, quite a lot of sort of cultural, artistic stuff. But art itself, I've always struggled with. But my dad, funnily enough, is very keen on art. And just recently, for Father's Day, we went to a gallery in London. And I accept complete ignorance here. But what I found interesting was it was about a bunch of abstract painters in the 19th century who were reacting to the fact that the camera had been invented.
Yeah.
And things were starting. You didn't need to have a painter to paint a really realistic photo of you. You just had a camera to do it. So a lot of artists were sort of rethinking what it meant to be an artist, and I think it was maybe Impressionism or something like that was starting to come out.
Yeah, that was what I was going to go on to say, actually. I once heard when I was at school, the first ever photograph was taken because somebody was at a shoe shop and had their foot up as they were having their shoe done, and therefore was stuck in a pose long enough to be caught by the camera. That was the first ever photograph. But once that happened, obviously, artists knew there was a new road to go down. Prior to that, there were actual artist paintings which were not used as photographs because photographs didn't exist then. I think the softest and most used picture first was the Mona Lisa, but before any of that stuff, it was all of the portrait painting, and of course now we've got video cameras, so it's all advancing.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think it sort of it asks the questions of what is art. If it's just a technical ability to paint really well, then there are sort of questions. Oh, why do you need that if you can take a picture? But of course, I guess the argument is that art is so much more than that, and it's more about the theme or the subject matter rather than does it look like what it's supposed to look like.
I suppose there was more. It was Steve Martin, the actor, who said that with abstract painting you can go back to it several times and get several interpretations. If something was a photograph that was so straightforward, there wouldn't be that many interpretations left. And there's a thing called concept art, which is designed to make you think, which in a nutshell is that the idea is more important than the object. So it's constantly giving interpretations to things. And that's really what the idea of the art is, whether that be performance art, whether that be musical art or whatever, you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, that. Because I don't know if this would count as art, for example, but one of my, not one of my favourite films, but one of the films I really like is called Sin City. And it is based on a graphic novel. And I guess that's an interesting question. Are graphic novels considered art? In the sort of more traditional sense, but obviously they're drawn, and I don't know what they use. I don't think they use paints, but they might do. And this film was obviously a live action film, but trying to look like it was a graphic novel. And I thought the way it then looked was absolutely incredible as a film.
Yeah, they did that similarly with a film about Van Gogh, but they did it in Van Gogh style, the entire movie, frame by frame. That must have taken years to do that. Or when they do the plasticine animations, all these extra bits, all these additives that they put to these things. But again, some people think it subtracts, the technology subtracts from it. I think it adds to it as long as you use it proportionately.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Definitely, yeah. Well, we're coming to the end on this one. Were there any final thoughts you wanted to raise before we moved on this one?
Not really. I just really enjoyed doing the research, and certainly finding out that photorealism was involved in photographing as well as painting was interesting. And but you know, even these days, when you enhance things, you can enhance them by computer, which you couldn't do back then. But particularly looking at old photography and bringing it clearer in quality today would be interesting. Bringing black and white into colour. I think I'll be looking more of that in the future.
Yeah, interesting. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, that was our take on art, as it were, for now. I'm sure we'll come back to this subject at some point down the line, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. A big topic area. I think we've barely scratched the surface.
Yes.
So the next subject we were going to talk about was around music. So I guess keeping within the sort of scope of art, and we were looking at plagiarism as against inspiration. And so the inspiration for that topic came about with a recent court case that involved Ed Sheeran, the superstar pop singer, and him being sued by now it was the estate of Marvin Gaye, I think, or it was his co-writer. I think it might have been both. His co-songwriter, and there's one of Ed Sheeran's absolutely massive songs is called Speaking Out Loud, I think it is. Oh, Thinking Out Loud. I mean, probably one of. I mean, he's obviously got a lot of hits. Probably one of his biggest ones. And anyway, they were trying to claim that they, being Marvin Gaye and his co-writers, the state, that he just stolen the song. And it's an interesting one because obviously we both played, we played music for a long time, and we've written music together. And that idea of what is the line between plagiarism or stealing and just being inspired. So I don't know if you wanted to kick off, Rory, on that and sort of your sort of general thoughts about maybe the Ed Sheeran case specifically, but if not, just sort of that kind of discussion it sparked between us about.
I'm not as up with the Ed Sheeran situation specifically. I think in a nutshell, the idea of inspiration is to take one fragment of an idea that served as your inspiration, and then you build on it from your own creative juices, as it were. And then, but plagiarism would be, taking a song like Ghostbusters, which is in every other way Ghostbusters, or whatever song you want to say it is. It could be She Loves You, any other song you wanted, and just changing all the words to it, making it a direct, not copy, but you can see there's an obvious reflection there, as opposed to taking one element like a bass line or a rhythm, and then building onto that in a fresh way. I think that's what is thought of as the differences between those two things.
Yeah, definitely. And what was interesting about the Sheeran trial was that he actually ended up going into court and playing his song, or playing the guitar to the jury to show them that the particular chord progression that they were claiming was stolen. There's about 5 different songs just from at the top of your head you could sing over the top of it.
That's very true.
And I saw an interesting analysis on a different YouTube video, a competitor of ours, if you will, and they were splitting the difference between a chord progression and a singing melody.
Yeah,
and their view was, you can do deviations of chords, but there's essentially 7 notes in a European music language, as it were. Essentially 7 chords. It's going to be impossible for someone to constantly create a new chord progression.
Oh yeah, I'm not very technical, so I can't comment on that exactly. But there was a court case where George Harrison had the same thing in the 1970s, and his subsequent song to that had the lyrics, "This song, there's nothing tricky about it." In other words, referring to, I've tried not to do anything tricky with this song. But again, it comes back to the inspiration factor. And there are lots of songs that are very alike to each other anyway. But again, it picks up on inspiration. For example, Whitney Houston was thought to be inspired by Aretha Franklin. But when you hear a Whitney Houston record, you know it's Whitney Houston. It doesn't mean that Whitney Houston didn't take inspirations from other artists and not have enough of her own style left. Because it was still identifiable as Whitney Houston. And that's really where the vagueness of that line is.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, famously, lots of bands play covers and sell them as singles.
Yeah.
But I think the point is perhaps that they're being upfront saying this is a cover. They're showing that recognition.
Yeah.
But an interesting one of again a shared love of ours, which is Oasis. Do you remember the song "Step Out"?
I think so. Just yes.
I think it was a B-side that never got put into an album, but it appeared on that Wembley album.
Yes,
Familiar to Millions, and that's the first time I'd heard it. And actually, Noel Gallagher lost a court case for that song against Stevie Wonder. And sort of going back to that point of saying about the difference between a singing melody and a chord progression, I think that the deal breaker for that case was they were saying the way he sings the chorus is so similar to one of Stevie Wonder's songs. It's terrible. I've forgotten which song it was now. But it was so similar that actually that singing melody was enough that he then had to pay a load of money, pay tributes, as part of any sales he makes from that song. And in the footnotes to the what they call them back in the day, the CD cover, where they put the notes. Yeah. They have to put co-written by Stevie Wonder, or his name has to appear on that.
Yes, I mean the Ruttles, who were a comedy band based on the Beatles, they actually had to involve some of the Beatles with their songs because they were deliberately similar tracks. It wasn't that they weren't good tracks, but they were deliberately similar. When Brian May, the band Five, asked Brian May if they could use the sample of his guitar in their version of "We Will Rock You," which is a kind of rap version, which is kind of their rap to the original "We Will Rock You" chorus by Queen. Brian May said, "If you're going to sample my guitar, why don't I play?" Which is a good question. So they ended up not only involving Brian May, but also Roger Taylor, the guitarist and drummer for Queen. So maybe if Noel Gallagher had said, Stevie Wonder, would you like to be involved in this track? If Stevie Wonder was playing on it anyway, in hindsight, maybe he wouldn't have been. Maybe there wouldn't have been the problems. It's and that would be a tribute, to Stevie Wonder's skills, for example.
Yeah, I think you perhaps just my take is that you hit the nail on the head there. That I think it's a lot more about recognition than anything else. I think it's if you are being influenced by something, like Oasis were very open that they loved the Beatles, all their musical style and the Beatles, and so no one ever questioned that they were stealing anything because they were always upfront about it. And I think it's that, and I think that's where the arguments come and the court cases come, is where if you don't show that recognition of what you've been influenced by, I guess that's where you can draw the line, getting close towards stealing and plagiarism.
Maybe people should make more documentaries about the ideas behind the songs, so that any inspiration, as opposed to direct plagiarism, but any inspiration and the story behind it is directly clarified.
Yeah. Definitely.
But it shows you how easily that can all be confused within what we've been discussing.
Absolutely, right. Not straightforward at all. Well, look, that brings us to the end of the podcast here. But again, as a singer-songwriter, is there any final thoughts on that particular topic?
Not really. I think we covered a good range there. But I'm not going to plagiarise anything you've said, incidentally.
Well, we've got it on recording now, so I've got my evidence for the jury if you do.
Oh, gosh.
Make sure I put a timestamp on
it. Thank you for joining us, guys. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks so much. And so just to reiterate, you can see the email on the screen. Do send us an email with any topics you reckon we should cover, any feedback. You can leave a comment on YouTube if you will be listening on YouTube, in the comment section there. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next, or hearing from you all for the next episode.
Cheers. Bye.